Welcome to the Value Analysis Expert Series. I'm Terri Nelson, and today I'm going to be your moderator for this session. And as always, I'm joined by my value analysis experts, Barbara Strain and Jenell Robertson. Thank you guys for being here today. Appreciate it. And our topic today, just really briefly, is going to be on supplier education. And the three of us have been in value analysis a long time, worked with a variety of different suppliers in different roles that they've had. So I'm interested to learn from you, what is current with the supplier education? Do you have programs? I think in my head, I think everybody has some way of educating suppliers when they come into their organization about value analysis or just how supply chain is run, function. But I'm not always sure if that's correct. And then have we outgrown our current structure and what should be the future? That is one thing these sessions have done, is made us all think about what's the next step? How should we do that? And that's the same, I think, in supplier education. Jenell, I'm going to start with that. You can tell me about your current experience with supplier education.
I'm going to be completely blunt. It's probably not great. I don't know if there is a structured program at each facility. And your third-party platforms, if you will, like the vendor checks and things like that, give a very high level education about the system, or you have the capability of give high level education about the system, who key contacts are and things of that nature. But I think until it gets to the point where they have that one-on-one conversation with the value analysis professional at that facility, that's really when the formal education starts. And I think, because you have to think about it from a hospital's perspective, there are thousands of suppliers, sometimes tens of thousands, depending on the size of the organization. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge to get curated educational material for everyone. So in my experience, it ends up being more of that one-on-one. Okay, this is what's required. This is, what we'll need. This is how we'll go about it. Let's talk about it together and come up with a strategy.
Good. Thank you. So Barbara, what would you add to that? What's been your experiences with supplier education? And I thought, you brought up a really good point about third parties. I had forgotten that because I didn't work with a third party value analysis tool that had education or vendor education type of tool. And I'm wondering, Barbara, did you work with something along that line, or your experience with the education there?
Well, we had a tool, and I'll get back to that later. What we did when I became the director, we called it value management. I worked very closely with contracting and also supply chain operations. And what I did is set up an orientation for suppliers. So I would schedule a certain time, certain days, whatever it was, and I'd bring members of my value analysis team and invite one of the purchasing managers or one of the other folks to an orientation. And we talked about how we did business at our organization. What was the right sort of steps and protocol, but what do we discuss at those? What do we want to hear at those sessions? And that proved to be very valuable for future, relationships with suppliers and understanding more about the either depth of their product reach or services reach or the narrowness of it and that sort of thing. So we took that on to make sure that everybody understood where we were in our business case and stuff. A couple great examples I've seen is in signature lines, people will have a link to here's how we do business here, or they make sure it's on their website. So value analysis or value management had a place on our website that was all supply chain. So you have to do different avenues of communication for education. so that everybody understood. So they were actually more relaxed when they came to see us. Or we were virtual, whatever works. Virtual today might be a little easier because you don't have to plan to have a conference room and people to come and that sort of thing. It's much easier to do that great orientation today.
Okay, Steph, was that?
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Jenell.
Barbara, I had a question regarding that because there are suppliers who have reps in particular that have been with the organization for years and years and years and may think or value analysis or whatever, it's called at different organizations. They may not have actually interacted at that, but even though they've been the rep for years and years. So is their information curated differently, or how is that? How did you deal with that?
So they were oriented if we had not in value analysis dealt with them personally before, and as we got all of our internal processes nailed down, we got the support for everything across executive leadership. So this was in the early 2000s. So anyone doing business, regardless if they carried a bag in there for 30 years or not, we said, here's how we're doing business today. So then that got them an opportunity to ask. So I don't go see, Dr. So-and-so like I always did so we said, no, we would like that this is the way it currently happens. And so you can do that with brand new or ones that have carried a bag for a long time or anything in between.
So how did you deal with non-compliant vendors?
Well, then the contracting director and I, we worked
on. There's always somebody who doesn't get the education, and they just simply don't know. They don't know what they don't know, and that's fair.
Interesting. This was a topic that came up a couple of days ago in a totally different conversation. Is that we had a policy that clearly outlined if you don't follow the policy XYZ that we put up in whatever the rep tracks or whatever it was, et cetera, here's what would happen. We had a 2-strike rule. If you didn't follow it, if you didn't make an appointment, if you didn't follow and make sure value analysis was looped in or however it was supposed to be work towards your policy, then we had a nice discussion. And a letter went to your boss and said another infraction would mean possibly getting a new rep or some other repercussion if it can't be followed.
Yeah, we had very similar, Jenell, the organization I worked with. It was three strikes. I'm surprised Barbara's wasn't because she's a huge baseball fan, but it was 3 strikes. And it was exactly that, we're telling you, we're giving courtesy. The first one, second time it went to your manager. And the third time it was replacement because it just wasn't functioning. But, the thing about those situations where they were very dynamic, they were very inappropriate. What they were doing, it wasn't simply, hey, I forgot, I went to Dr. Johnson first. It wasn't those things. It was things when an administrator, right, I'm assuming Barbara and Jenell, I bet you've had this too, would call you and say, so-and-so came in and interrupted our meeting. It was major events, so it didn't happen. And so it sounds like that was kind of the driver for what both of you said for doing some education. I had 2 questions. One, Barbara, was your education sessions limited? Because it sounded like you might have had multiple individuals from an organization represent or a supplier represented. Were they just one supplier company that members that were there, or would you open it to more from other companies?
There was usually the one who was going to call on us. And most of the time, if they were brand new, usually they brought their regional manager, or we might ask, do you have a regional manager that, we could call into this or whatever? Some of the other education and stuff we'll talk about, I know, further on here. But to start out with, it was the rep, but also to learn what was their sort of hierarchy. Do you have a regional? Is it a statewide rep? Is it, who do you report to so that we can understand your structure as well? Because we might have to go to a different level, not because the rep did something, untoward, but because we needed a different level of information in order to complete sort of a tool set of information that we really needed. And the old passing down of conversations back to the rep and back and forth and things sometimes would lose because their translation, because we'd ask another question, they go, well, I don't have an answer to that. So then it just extends the time. So it's much better to have more of a little group call on certain occasions so that way we totally understand and everybody learns on both sides.
Yeah, I think this is really what I'm hearing from both of you, too, is fundamentals of how to work one-on-one with an organization, the supplier working with the provider, and the provider letting you know the nuances of what we need to do, the very basics to make you successful in that. I'm curious because both of you have been doing value analysis and consulting for a while. When we say they're experts in experience, I mean, you truly are experts within that. So you've done that locally. Where would you see the future? Is there more education that needs to be done with a supplier organization, or should it look differently? I've been thinking a lot about this on my own, thinking about are we going to another level, which is part of the conversation we've had at every session we've done. So I'm curious with you, and I'm going to start with Barbara this time. Do you think there should be next steps and what that evolution potentially might look like from your perspective?
Well, to sort of make a leap from currently what happens to what should happen today, to a next leap of a future, I think we have to make sure that we're at least doing what should be done today by most people. So when I'm doing the consulting piece of my work with suppliers, I talk about how to not just jump in and look at, oh, here's my product and, put it on a table or take a view of it or whatever you're doing, is that let's get to know each other, to the point that we understand why you even made this piece of equipment or device and what's the sort of culture at your company. And then we can share where we are and things. I think in the future, and the future is coming at us pretty fast, the headwinds are just changing daily sometimes. And the latest announcement from FDA is that they're going to start using AI and they're going to get to approvals quicker. They're going to get to safety quicker. They're going to do a variety of things. And they're way ahead of schedule, according to Dr. Macari, about what's going to happen. So that when the suppliers now get in a faster pipeline, then we're all going to have to think faster and differently about what does that really look like. Yeah. So, we need to get stay updated with what's going on both the provider and the supplier side through regulatory and other headwinds that are hitting all of us. And we all need to change and pivot so it benefits both organizations on behalf of the patient. Can't let that slip through the slide.
You bring up a really good point. There's this, and I know I kind of said that before, but there's this organization education for suppliers to be successful. That's fundamental. And that's not something as in consulting and value analysis we can do. You got to talk with the organization. We can tell you how to do that. And then there is I was hearing what you were saying, Barbara, is like, well, I was hearing what you were saying, Barbara, but how I interpret it was things are going to move so fast, we're going to get caught in the middle. And suppliers are going to say, you have to do this type of thing and won't have a structure to actually be successful. But Jenell, what are your thoughts about what Barbara said, and where would you like to see? You know, magic wand, where would you want to be?
Wave it. I think Barbara was spot on, and something that maybe dovetails into what she said from a supplier perspective is preparation. think about preparation and the long game. So, and what I mean by that is you have a product ready, you have a target, clinician or whatever, you have a specific organization in mind who's going to be your beachhead. This is what you want. This is where this is where you want to make your mark in the world. But you haven't had that discussion or understand the organizations or the facilities structure. So my whole thought on how to kind of get ahead of the FDA, speed racer is to have those conversations early. So you fully understand the organization that you're targeting and how to navigate it and what to do and make sure your I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Because I think, the changes and the reductions in reimbursement and all the changes with CMS and Medicaid and, all of these things are just coming down like lead balloons, right? But they're going to have implications on each other. So if there's a supplier who hasn't fully followed the rules, I don't want to sound militant, but who doesn't understand the organization and maybe inadvertently or through time crunch or whatever it is, brings in a product and circumvents the approval process, organizations are smart to that. And they have policies that say, if this has not been pre-approved, thank you, you donated. So now it's impacted both. It's impacted the organization who is like, yeah, we really should have paid for this and we kind of wanted to pay for it because we can't track our financial performance if we don't pay for it. Can't charge a patient if you don't pay for it. And then it also has implications to the supplier that's like, oh, we just donated a $15,000 implant or whatever it is. And how many times can you do that and maintain your financial viability? So preparation, I think, is kind of my key on how to get ahead of the fast moving FDA train.
It made me think not just your donation to the organization, but your job. How long are you going to keep your job? Because sometimes it is, and Barbara mentioned, the individuals who are providing your representation for an organization that may not understand that. And not having a reimbursement codes that are acceptable does create an issue for us organizationally. So what would you like?
And I got to drop one more thing in there it's also a big patient safety thing. If it hasn't fitted through value analysis and we've not looked at FDA and quality and checks and all that kind of stuff and, done some other research, it could be a big patient safety thing.
Yeah. And a liability. It can be a liability issue.
I just think back in the days, say the two words blood warmer.
Oh.
See, I knew that would. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say trunk stock, which is which is similar.
In my basement.
Yeah.
Like, what? You brought it in from your trunk?
Yeah.
That was just amazing to me. But, and we talked about this a little bit pre-work. But one of the things I have learned, and I am new to the consulting world, one of the things I've experienced is my point of contact historically always was the sales department. It was the individual doing the sales. And I agree, but I always like to know who they reported to. But it was usually up to the sales department, right there, that division. But what do you guys think, if you could, what would be the other, because organizations, especially large organizations, suppliers, have multiple departments. And I'm thinking from value analysis, we need to know what those are and have some kind of dialogue. And so I'm curious as to, Barbara, what do you think? What would you like to see that look like as when you talk about education too?
So I have lots of thoughts about this. So I'll let Jenell talk in a little bit. But anyway, I'll be succinct. When I was practicing in the hospital, we would actually, in the days where you put the phone in the middle of the table and it was a, phone, and then we got, fancy with bringing them in virtually and stuff. But I would say, I think we need someone from your quality department in on this meeting, whether it was virtual or live or whatever, because we have concerns about, and we want to know how you did those analysis and how the quality of the product meted out through your trials, what you submitted to the FDA, those sorts of things. Sometimes, so I'll go back over into wear my consulting hat. I'll say when I'm trying to get after information about a product, sometimes it's marketing I'm talking to, sometimes it's sales, which those two need to be talking better together. And we talked about that before. But I say I need to talk to sometimes your quality person. I need to talk to your data and analytics people of how they're putting your QBRs, quarterly business reviews or things together. And I've actually talked to the guy from the production line because I want to know certain things. So it depends on the product and how it's expecting to impact patients and the actual provider organization, who you need to bring into the conversations, no matter which side you're sort of sitting on. Because everybody needs to understand what's going on. And I always say organization, because it doesn't matter if you're a provider or a supplier, you need to understand what's going on into your organization so you can make those connection points effectively and not just handed a PowerPoint and said, we did some training and now I'm trying to talk to you.
Yeah. Jenell, what are your thoughts?
Can I just like duplicate what Barbara said? But no, I think just one other thing from a supplier's perspective that could be helpful, especially for the very large organizations where they have multiple divisions and there may be 3 different similar divisions that roll up into one regional director, and some type of very basic, it doesn't have to get down to the, manufacturing line. Because that's kind of, Barbara, love you, but that's kind of an oddity. Like we don't always talk to the, to the actual production folks. But there are circumstances, so have that in your back pocket. But for a simple, I guess, educational tool for the hospital, for the hospital's behalf, is have a high-level org chart. Because that sales rep is typically the face of your company. We all know that. So as a value analysis professional, I'm going to go to my sales rep, but I need a quote. We need to negotiate on this pricing. I need a quote. So therefore, can we save time and can I go straight to your manager? But I don't know who that manager is. So give me a roadmap. Give me a roadmap to your quality folks. Give me a roadmap, a contact to your reimbursement folks, your coding folks, your whatever it is, but all of the high level points that value analysis looks at to bring an item into a facility. I want a key contact for each one of those points, understanding that the rep is still going to be the face of that company and the conduit in some cases, but there are some cases where we can speed things along by not going through the rep and just going straight to, especially in the contracting or the price negotiation, who has the authority to do that. And, we can see the rep, but it's faster to go straight to the source, and that benefits both.
Yeah. And I think you both actually referred to it. It depends on the size of the organization, right? I did have in more recent time, sales representatives who would provide a spreadsheet that would list who the key contacts were for, and I actually do like to know their supply chain inventory management person, especially during COVID, right? Because we ran into all the back orders and it was material related, and understanding, oh yeah, I the salesperson may say, I'm going to get it in 2 weeks, right? Okay, you've all experienced it. 2 weeks becomes 4 months and it becomes a year. And then, but the supply chain guy understood, man or woman, understood that, oh, we get it from so-and-so and it's on a boat and it's in a harbor and blah, blah, blah. That's what you want to know, not for friction, not to check them, but to be able to work better. And that's one thing I'm hearing from I think all 3 of us have this. I'm not saying you should educate because you don't know. I want you to understand us both ways so we can work better together. And we can be productive on how we do that part of it. So we're coming up. I know we have a little bit more time, but I want to know we talked about it a little bit. And we talked about some of the different roles that have been in, especially in the supply world. I was just amazed. It's like, really? I always thought you were X department. And they said, no, we have nothing to do with that. It's like, I like what you do, so I want to learn more about it. So, two, if we have value analysis colleagues looking at this, watching this video, which I hope we do, I think I heard both of you say you need an entry level. You need a fundamental. How do you operate on my campuses, my organization, right? That's pretty much, and whether you do a third party because they're out there or your own hybrid product internally developed, that's fine. Then it is a more education to some of those representatives that come to your organization, how they can be one-on-one. I heard Barbara does that as well. And networking with some of the leadership that they have. So in your perfect world, how would you want to see education to this? This is in 2030. Your goal in 2030. What would you expect to have that relationship? And what would be some of the dependencies with that? The reason I said that was a small company, I don't expect to be as big as have as developed program as a big company. That's why I said that. But what do you think, Jenell? In 2030, what would you like to see as far as supplier education or provider-supplier relationships?
I would like to see expectations up front in, I just think we can leverage some of those third parties, like your rep tracks. And, Barbara, as much as I love the idea of having an orientation, that gets challenging. That's resource heavy sometimes for some hospital organizations to be able to do that. So there may be a simple expectation, required forms. You need to read our policy. So I think it really means the hospital organization having their ducks in a row and being able to provide that to the suppliers coming in when they do their annual. I use rep tracks. I know there are other vendor management systems, but when they sign up with their vendor management systems, that they have to adhere to it and it becomes a requirement. So if there's questions, they have the opportunity then to reach out to the value analysis professional at the organization to answer their questions. This is what we're looking for. This is how, this is what you need to do. And then that's when that in-depth conversation can take place if they have a question about the policy or aren't comfortable with it or whatever it is. And I would just like to see it more seamless. In a perfect world, it would be some type of standardized process that is more seamless.
Yeah.
Less one-on-one talking. It takes time, and it takes time away from implementing.
Yeah. Jenell, or Barbara, I'm sorry, Barbara.
I'm Barbara.
Usually I call you something else, but I'm going to call you Barbara today. Barbara, what are your thoughts? And could you give us your parting? We're at the top of our time here.
Yeah. So I've got three little things. So thank you, Jenell, for giving me a breath of fresh air so I could think about this a little bit. In the future of 2030, there's no reason why we can't start this today. We should just have a video of what we expect, and it's a link. Please do this. That can be put in your vendor, whatever it is, system. It can be put on your website, whatever, so that you have, here's how we do business together and things like that. The second thing was the supplier who's ever interfacing with you, and this is just a little bit from the other conversation that I remembered that I wanted to probably bring into this, is they're actually your voice of the customer back to your supplier organization. So that you should be having internally downloading, what did you learn today? What are these customers really looking for and stuff, and not, being disjointed. And the third thing I wanted to say, and this is my sort of outro part of this, is that I learned a few days ago that we do have value analysis professionals and provider organizations listening to these sort of talks, how they stumbled across them or how we did on LinkedIn and, reposted them and things. But they got others to listen to it, and they were complimenting that we're learning a lot. So I think these conversations have been important for all the parties, and that maybe they can pass on to others that need to maybe learn and things about all this. So I like the pitter patter that we're doing, but based on, what we've done historically, but also telling us to go in the future. You realize how old I'm going to be in 2030. And hopefully I'm not at the hearing aid stage yet and things. But anyway, that's what I would say. We need to adopt anything electronic or whatever today, because there are tens of thousands of companies and representatives and tens of thousands of people like us you need to talk to, and you all can't do it. It's got to be someplace that you need to get in contact with.
I'm snickering because for years she said, "What did you say?" She's already responded, "What did you say?" And I thought she was hard of hearing. Now, full disclosure, Barbara is not hard of hearing. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Value Analysis Expert Series so you can always stay in touch and know what's going on. I wanted to add with education, everything you said is, there are tools out there. This isn't labor intensive. There are tools that you can use to do that. And by explaining to your colleagues, which will be suppliers, they're your colleagues that you work with, and understanding how each one of you operate is going to make your companies much more successful, both on the provider and the supplier side. But if you never give them education on how to be successful in an organization, because healthcare is complicated, just how we refer to things, it can be very complicated, then you're not going to be as successful, and we want to do that. So I appreciate you all being here on the call. It was great. I know Skender will miss this, and he'll say, "Oh, it looks like so much fun." So let's have fun out there, because it's all about having fun. And I want you to have a good day. So thank you very much for participating.
Thank you, Terri. Thanks, Jenell.
Thank you.